So my family on most months made about $650 a month.
We weren't ever on food stamps. Instead, my parents would steal.
I played football for my high school team. My dad walked across the city to watch me play. He didn't have enough money to go in, so he stood on the fence and watched.
Wow.
Right? And he's crying because he's embarrassed in front of his son. But I remember I got clothes from this free store on, let's say, a Monday, wore them on a Wednesday, and a kid at my school said, "Oh, that's my clothes."
Oh my gosh,
like,
you're kidding.
And so, like, those are the moments in which you want to, like, melt.
Welcome to the Laura Neuman Show. My guest today is Dr. John Brothers. It's great to have you here, John.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Your story is incredible.
Oh, thank you.
I know that you shared it and you're writing a book about it, but I think for our listeners, it's going to be really interesting to understand how you went from a really challenging childhood to tremendous success. And I kind of want to unpack that, and I want to talk about some of the how and the why and the lessons that you learned along the way. But I want to go back to the beginning first.
Sure.
Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood?
Yeah, of course.
Those early years?
Yeah. The best way to say it is I grew up like lots of people in the U.S. grew up where, 80% of the U.S., they're waiting for their next paycheck if they don't have that. And so certainly if I grew up within a family in which we were certainly low income, inches away from homelessness most times, lived in sometimes condemned houses. But what I would also say is loving family many times. I have two brothers, amazing brothers. They're my best friends. My mom is my hero. She's my hero because she's got beauty, grit, and grace, which is things that I admire. But within that, it was a challenging upbringing, right?
So let's take a moment on low income, because
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people that would be poverty. So where is the line between low income and poverty? Because you guys were homeless. I mean, you were
Yeah.
truly homeless. You were living in abandoned houses.
Yeah, so my family on most months made about $650 a month, family of five. And then we got food stamps, and that was usually around $211. So I know that because when you would get it every month, you would see $211, and then they would go and cash them in. So
Was that your entire childhood?
most of it, my parents were. My mom always was trying to work. If you're home during the day, you see oftentimes lots of programs to become a bookkeeper or become a machinist. My mom was a nurse, a bookkeeper, a machinist, and a variety of other jobs.
So I find that interesting. She clearly had skills. And I think about my own family.
Sure.
My parents had skills too, but
Yeah.
they weren't reliably employed.
Right.
We didn't have health insurance growing
Right.
up. I mean, there were moments when we did, but most of the time we didn't.
Yeah.
And it was contract work, or it was, an opportunity that, they might have been able to take advantage of, but we knew it wasn't long term.
Yeah.
The big reputable name brand companies, the place where you ultimately made your career,
Right.
weren't places that were employing my parents. And it sounds like they weren't employing yours either.
No, I mean, I think most people that grow up in the circumstances that we grew up were always $50 away from a real big tragedy. So if you think about $650,
So true.
$50 is a big dent in that. And so, my parents were always good about paying the rent, paying the electric, and getting our, but anybody that grows up in perpetual poverty, they're likely also dealing with some level of dysfunction. My dad was an amazing man, but his demons were carried over through alcohol. And so he was addicted to alcohol. And that would eat up a sizable chunk of our money. But he was also one of the smartest people I ever met, gregarious and funny. And when he had all of his bearings, you could see all the great qualities that he had. When he was dealing with his, working through his demons, he was drinking pretty heavily.
Did you understand that, though, when you were a child, that you had limited resources, and some of those limited resources were going toward a vice? And in our family, I think about when I was a child, I remember the VHS tapes came out, VCRs came out. I am showing my age, I get that. But when they came out and you could go rent them at a store, my parents would return those tapes late. And I remember as a child thinking, why are you paying all those late fees when we don't have enough money for, the basic necessities?
Yeah. I mean, I think...
How do you reconcile that when you're a kid?
Well, this is what I would say is, for me, I started working in 7th grade. So actually, even before that, I folded pizza boxes at a local pizza store. So I knew that the value of earning something and getting money in return I think, for us every month, we're just trying to make it through, and there's a formula to it. So for most people, if they that have made it out of poverty in the ways that I have, which is a very small percentage, there's a formula to public assistance. So you'll get paid on the first of the month. That money usually lasts you, vice or not, until around the 10th. Around the 10th of the month, you get food stamps. Food stamps pays for food, but the change buys other things. That gets you to around the 20th. So you split it up into thirds. And then at the end of the month, you're eating from soup kitchens and food pantries and those types of things. And then you're trying to make it to the first again. So that's the pattern. When they had the ability to make money, that wasn't my pattern anymore. Right? I was a caddy. And I made a lot of money. I made $80 a day as a 7th grader.
That's a lot of money.
It was.
Even today, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, it totally is. So for me, like having my own cash, now sometimes that money went back to the house and funded the family or things within the house. And many times it funded my ability to buy clothing or take my friends out or just be normal. I also grew up in a community in which kids were bused into my school. So I saw kids coming from communities and where their parents and families had more resources than me. And so I would say, oh, well, I want to be like them. So I remember after spring break, some of the kids came back tanner because they had gone on a summer vacation. I never went on a summer vacation.
No.
But I knew they had a life that I didn't have. I saw it on the golf courses. I saw it in my school. And I was like, well, that is something that I want.
The people I've talked to who make it out, they had that very thought.
Right.
I want that.
Right.
And then it becomes a question of, can you overcome the vices that we all have because we're all human?
Right.
And get to that. Like,
Right.
what is it? How are you able to make that transition?
There's a thing out there that I love that's called ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences. You and I have talked about
Yeah, I was going to
this.
bring this up with you because it's so important to
powerful.
share this with our listeners.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't know about it.
It's powerful. If you think about ACEs, there's 10 of them. And you can go online and take the test. It's free, but you can find out kind of how much does trauma affect from your childhood. How much trauma do you carry? Like me, a parent that drank. For me, I had 8 ACEs, and that's less than 1%.
I'm an 8 too.
Yeah, so it's very rare to see somebody who's 8 ACEs or higher. And that's just people who identify as that. Most people that are that high are still cycling through the same kind of poverty. That's why poverty is cyclical, right? It's really hard to break out. It's generational. My ancestors came from Ireland as indentured servants, right? So like generations have been poor. But if you make it out and have some level of success, that's actually even way less than 1%. So I find, I know that it's rare for where I sit, but I also know that every step that I take is embedded with some of those traumatic experiences. And so for me, as I navigate the world, I have to also understand, am I taking that step because I come from a place of trauma, or am I taking that step for another reason? And most times than not, I'm taking that step because it's based in some kind of traumatic experiences as a young person. And I think that's a good thing for me to know. Most people don't know that.
So I want to take a minute because I do think that you've made an important distinction, which is, a lot of people were poor for generations. Sure. I mean, we're a nation of immigrants.
Of course.
And so, like your family, my family came over with nothing. And in our case, we weren't indentured servants. We made the choice to come here. People lived modestly, and they were really about resourcefulness and getting by and helping each other. And multiple generations lived in the same house. But homelessness is a whole nother level. That's poverty.
Yeah.
That's a very different kind of experience. And when you add in the trauma, which is directly correlated with homelessness, I think it's a much more challenging experience than just not having enough.
It's true. I do. What I would say, though, is part of the saving grace for me was that there were great services around me specifically, and I took advantage of them. So... And I'm talking about after-school programs and sports team. I played sports throughout my life all the way through college, right? And so for me, I had caring teachers that invested in me. I also, anybody that's grown up in that situation can also point to the many occurrences, which is what many parts of the book are about, in which people were really uncaring and not helpful. And
Oh,
create
I thought you were
systems.
going to say caring. Like,
No, there's
I
some that
hear
are.
all the time, like, all these people inspired me, and I love that honesty.
Well, so there are those, right? I had an amazing boxing coach that had a monkey and was really nice, and I remember him vividly. But I also remember, God, so many times in which the experiences of being poor and coming up against systems designed to help you, that in fact were opposite of that.
Do you have an example?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of examples. I think one of the stories that I tell often, and it's how the book came to be, is, you're talking about the end of the month. At the end of the month, we would go to soup kitchens. And I remember going to a place in Minneapolis at the end of the month, and Minnesota's cold, if you didn't know that. And in November, we were there, and they were giving out shoes. So we stood in line, and they gave us a ticket, and we were going to get food and some shoes. So when we walked in, and I think I was like in fifth, sixth grade at the time, and I loved going on walks with my dad. We would walk all over the city. One is because we didn't
Really?
have bus money, but two, it was just a time to be with him. And
We did the same
we
thing.
loved it, and we would
Loved
just
it.
do these urban hikes that I still love to this day. And when I do hike around Baltimore, I think, in some part, I think of being with my dad. And so we would do these amazing hikes. And this day we went through downtown into this place and stood in the line, and then got through. They gave us the ticket. And when we walked in, there were rows of chairs and buckets of water in the middle of the aisles. And so I was like, oh, I don't know what those buckets of water are, but whatever. And so my dad instantly knew. And so he said, oh, crap. And he went to the last row of chairs in the farthest seat that
Oh,
you could
my
get in.
goodness. I know where you're going. Go
And
ahead.
so as we sat there, a woman walked in who's well known in the community that in Minneapolis that we grew up in. And she had a person following her with towels. She had someone taking pictures. She had another person. So she had kind of an entourage. And she would kneel down and wash people's feet.
That would be so hard.
Well, and when I tell this story, sometimes I tell it from the perspective of the woman coming in. And,
Well-intentioned.
and and everybody, and lots of people are like, oh my God, that's so sweet. And she's so great. And she's so kind. And she, in some part, are those things.
But I'd be a human.
But when she got to my dad,
Gosh. Well,
my dad is, over 6 foot, over 300 pounds, is a big Irish Catholic man. And he was crying.
of course.
And he's crying because he's embarrassed in front of his son, who he had done a really amazing walk with. And now he has to have this woman wash his feet so that... Now, when you think about that, what do we really want? Shoes and a meal. Can you do that gracefully and with dignity? Or do you have to do it in that way? And those are the occurrences. I can remember Toys for Tots, and nothing against the people that dedicated their time to doing that. But oftentimes those experiences made it worse rather than better. And
I get it.
oftentimes the reasons were, it wasn't about me. It was about like making sure that I served this needy person, or whatever the case may be. And I think those many people who have made it out of poverty, when I see them and we talk about war stories of growing up poor, many times those are the stories that come up. One, it's because it's great that we made it out. But number two, there's an underling of pain that goes with being helped, when the helping isn't necessarily about the person, but is about you and about doing it and those types of things.
People aren't looking for a savior. What they're looking for is a way to get to a
Yeah.
better life.
Right.
They want to be treated with respect
Of
and
course.
dignity
That's right.
and be seen.
Right.
And I say that all the time. And it's like,
Right.
I think if you haven't grown up that way, it's hard to understand,
Right.
because the intention is good.
Yes.
But in fact, it undermines the
Yeah,
result.
it's true. Well, and again, like, we didn't need to go through an hour of foot washing. I could have got shoes and a soup in 20 minutes and been in and out, and it would have been just as fine.
And
My
said,
walk
"Thank
with my
you."
dad would have been great.
Yep.
But for me, that was one of the most tragic moments of my life, because this powerful figure who is my dad was reduced to this small for no reason other than to the pomp and circumstance of this woman and the nonprofit that she led.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, where was your mom in all of this? Because you said that your mom was your best friend.
Yeah. I mean, my mom is, she grew up actually in a family that actually had resource. She grew up in Chicago. Her dad was a well-known chef. He worked at the Playboy Club in Chicago, and that's a prominent position.
That
in
was a
Chicago.
thing.
Yeah, it's a big deal in the city. And my mom's best friend growing up was her mom, and her mom died of epilepsy when she was really young, and her dad remarried really quickly, and there was a family dynamic that kind of ostracized my mom, and then she kind of went in a different direction, and then they met my dad, and they when they first started dating worked at 7-Eleven, but they led this kind of life that was not like the one that she had previously lived, but just kind of blue collarish. They had money and things like that, money enough to live.
Working class.
Working class. There you go. But then, as my dad's demons became more prominent, I think the financial situation got more dire, and my mom became the primary worker in the family.
That was true in my family too. My father was prescription drugs.
Yeah. And so my mom had, for most of my life, in some way, shape, or form, and kind of worked different types of things. There's a thing in community, it's called daily pay. And those are jobs in which you get hired on the day and you get fired on the day, and you can make a certain wage. My mom did that for many years, but she was also a bookkeeper and did lots of jobs for a while.
Wow.
But when you're managing a family, you got 3 boys and a husband that's dealing with difficult things. It's hard to maintain stability in that environment. But she's my hero because
love it.
She made it work, and all 3 of us are doing really, really well, which is. You say one person making it out of poverty. In fact, all 3 of us, the sons.
I do want to talk about that because I think that's absolutely fascinating. It's not unusual for 1 or 2 to make it out, but for all 3 of you to make it out. But I was going to ask you what the lesson was in those early years, and I thought it was going to be around family and staying together because your parents stayed together, and you obviously still had a close relationship with them. But I actually think for our listeners, the lesson is really around how you can help people.
Yeah.
In a way that doesn't make them feel bad.
Yeah, again, I think most people that are walking the streets today are 1 to 2 checks away from not having a home. That's proven, right? So everybody is struggling through something. The way in which you help somebody is really, really important. And I think the how, it's ultimately what the book is about, but if you think about who, what, where, why, when, and how, we often don't think about the how. And in fact, when you talk to anybody about the way, and you think about society today, most people are going to talk about a way a system treated them and how it treated them unfairly or how this happened. Doesn't matter if you're in a red state or a blue state or a rural state or an urban environment. The how is really, really important. And I think it's the thing that's least discussed. And so for me, as someone who grew up against systems that were trying to help people grow out of poverty, more times than not, those systems were really challenging, and the how was the reason.
This is actually the most interesting part for me, is how you went from a challenging childhood, homelessness, parents who were struggling, to getting not only through school, but succeeding in school. Right. I mean, when I looked you up on LinkedIn, I was like, wow, 1 degree after another. Right. And the reason I'm so interested in that is because you did it, and it's going to surprise you, this word's going to surprise you, the traditional way to success, which is, checking the right boxes, being successful on the education path all the way through a PhD. Yeah. And I just think it's so interesting for our listeners to understand how you were able to do that, first in the circumstances you were in, but I'm also thinking about myself and how I didn't feel like I could do that. Like education didn't feel available to me. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Like, what do we do? What do we say to the people who don't feel like they've been identified as someone who has potential and put on a track for success, who's been given a scholarship and said, we believe that you can be successful. Now, you earned it, right? Of course. I mean, you worked hard and, you were a leader in your class. Yes. So share some of your experiences on that journey from being a child to being a leader, and then also how you were able to make that transition, because I think that would be helpful.
I think there were a couple of things that happened, right? I think when people are in these circumstances where they're going from somebody who's being served to somebody who's different, ultimately, I think just being in halfway decent schools was really helpful.
So you felt like your schools were really supportive?
As I look back now, statistically, the school that was down the block from me was actually one of the lowest rated schools in the city. But I had folks within that. There were most public schools have tracks, right? And most times they send kids from my neighborhood to kind of general population. But they had a thing in my elementary school.
That's so true.
Called North Wind Warriors, and a couple of other programs that I qualified for. And school for me, I could get there and have breakfast in the morning, free breakfast, stay there through the day, and then go to an after school program. And so that became a safe place for me. Or I could leave school and then go to the local park, and I played football, baseball, and wrestling, right? So for me, like, organized activities in public systems actually were a saving grace for me.
That gave you structure.
They did, right? And so, I would get home 8 o'clock at night, and have been you wouldn't have been able to tell the difference between me and somebody who grew up in an affluent community, because they were doing the exact same things, right? They were in structured activities. And my mom would just sign the sheet and say, yeah, that sounds good, sign it and whatever. And if I had a game, they would sometimes come, and like lots of parents, and so to the outside person, I'm in organized activities and my parents sometimes are there. That was great, right?
How did they afford it though? How were you able to?
Well, they would walk. So like, one of the stories in the book is I played football all the way through college, but in high school, I played football for my high school team. My dad walked across the city to watch me play. He didn't have enough money to go in, so he stood on the fence and watched,
wow.
Right? So, and
I love that. Like, I literally love that.
Yeah. So, he was a dedicated parent like
That's
anybody.
That's amazing.
Didn't have bus money. Didn't have, it's likely at the end of the month when we didn't have any cash to do that. And so he was not a lot of parents might not do that. He did that. And, he was really into me and my brother's wrestling and football efforts, and was really supportive of us doing that. So I always had those activities. And within those activities, I was sometimes a captain or a leader on the team, or I joined clubs.
But wait a minute, how did you know you could do that? Like, how did you know that you could be the captain when you're going home to a very different experience?
Well, I would say being in those environments, no one had to know that. So like when I got to middle school or high school and I would get a ride home, Minneapolis, where I grew up, is such a place where you could be in it's similar to Baltimore, where you can be in 4 or 5 blocks that are really not the best. Mm-hmm. But there could be a block where the houses look nicer.
Mm-hmm. Did you get dropped off a block away?
I got dropped off, and I would go, I would walk in the back, and then I would jump over a fence, and I would walk home 5 blocks.
Oh my
gosh.
And
so,
yeah.
So no one knew, and it was partly because I didn't let them see that, right? And so I had a girlfriend from 8th grade till freshman year in college, the same girlfriend, and she had never been in my house once. She knew that I was poor.
Wow.
But she didn't really know that was what's going on behind the scenes. And so I think if you're really protecting both sides, protecting people from seeing that or coming up against that. I mean, I lived in 2 condemned homes, and people would pick me up a block away, right? So no one had to know that. And then when I'm over here and I'm in those organized activities, I get to be that person who ultimately is who I really am. I'm both.
You get to decide who you are.
Yeah, but if I'm football and I'm excelling there and people believe that I'm, that they want to follow me or listen to me, that gives me validation. That's great. I'm starting to realize I am someone with a voice and authority. That's great. But I'm also somebody who is eating cheese from the government at the end of the month, right? Or I can be both at the same time.
We didn't have food stamps. My parents would never accept that.
Yeah.
Instead, they went to my grandmother and got money, and they went to the church.
Right.
The church really saved us quite a bit, and the churches really had an important role in the community at the time.
Yeah.
But I was an adult. I was in my 20s. The first time I remember a friend driving me to home. We weren't in an abandoned house. We lived with my grandmother. And I just remember crossing from where he lived, his side of town, to my side of town. And it was the first time I was just embarrassed because I realized that he was like uncomfortable being there.
Yeah.
And I like that feeling of being in his car is with me to this day.
Right. I mean, I think I remember growing up, and if your house was condemned, they would put a fluorescent sign on it that said condemned. So it was bright. You could see it for blocks away, right? And
all kinds of identifiers of people who are struggling.
I remember we would just tear it down.
Yes, of course.
So, if you looked at clinic, like if you're a social worker and you're looking at the definitions of homeless or condemned, we fit all of those criteria, right? But if I can tear the sign down and I have electricity and I'm living in this house, I'm like anyone else. Now, yes, that house is condemned, right? But the sign's not on there anymore. So at least that day it's
They
not.
didn't make you leave, though? Like, the government didn't make you
I mean,
move out?
eventually they did, and then we had to find another place on the
Got
spot,
it.
and we moved to another place that eventually became condemned. And
Wow.
and the condemned was like the
Did
houses.
it have running water?
Yeah, they were functional houses. Well, the one that got condemned was a duplex, and the downstairs neighbor fell asleep cooking cheeseburgers. Now, they're not the best conditioned houses.
I understand.
Then when I moved to the other one, we lived upstairs again, and the guy downstairs never flushed his toilet, and it got backed up, and it was like sewage and gross. And by any measure, as a parent today with my kids,
Right.
that's gross, and it's not a healthy place to be. But for us, it was fine.
Right.
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 And then ultimately moved to an apartment, and everybody in the place got their checks on the first, but the downstairs neighbors use drugs and you can smell them, right? And that's fine, like whatever. But like for us in our little space that we can control, things were as normal as they could be. But by the definition of folks on the outside looking in, you could be clinically homeless. And yes, we were 200% of the poverty line and all the things that people would say. But I also could be a football player in high school and be successful, or I was senior class president, and I could be all of those things and still be in those situations. They can both happen at the same time, which for many years they did.
I have this saying that I don't believe everything happens for a reason.
Right.
Like, I don't think trauma happens for a reason.
Right.
I just don't sign up for that. I don't think that there's this, masterful plan in the universe that we're supposed to go through trauma.
Right.
But I do think if you can, like, find your way through it,
Right.
you're much stronger.
Yes.
You can be very successful. It does, if you start to believe that you can get through it, then you start to develop the foundation for success.
Yes.
Because that's resilience, that's determination. Like, those hard moments are what prepare us.
Yeah. I mean, I do think, like, when I think about the people that the people that I hung out with as a young kid, right? Some of them are in jail for life. Right. Some of them have not made it out. Right. Some of them have. Right. Like, ultimately for me, it was pretty clear when I saw people who I viewed as, I wouldn't say successful, but were making it, were in a place where, they were just happier, doing better. I was like, well, that's who I want to be. Right. And so it just became easier for me to just, oh, wow, that person plays football. I'm going to play football. I enjoy football. Well, I'm going to do that. Oh. And then as I just started doing that, that just became my life. And I liked that life. And so
That's
I
amazing.
succeeded in that way. Yeah.
It does sound like you felt like you could count on your family, even though it was dysfunctional, it wasn't ideal, there were definitely challenges, there were demons for sure.
Sure.
But it does sound like it sounds to me like you felt close to them, like you loved your parents and you loved your brothers and you felt like you were a family.
Yeah. I mean, I think my mom for sure. I think my dad, it was just, when you have an addiction, that addiction takes over just from a real estate of time. Mm-hmm. If you're addicted to something, your mode is getting alcohol and spending money on that and then engaging in that activity. And so what I would say is when the times in which my dad was winning that battle and we got
So there were times when he was...
Well, and it would mostly have to do when we didn't have any money because we didn't have, when I
Can't buy
got
anything.
him and we were going on a walk at the end of the month, you saw all of the amazing and beautiful qualities that made him who he was. But that was a very small sliver. And so for me to be able to count on him when his addictions took over him, you can't count on somebody that's in an addiction. But
I didn't expect you to say that.
Yeah.
So you're saying that when the money ran out and he couldn't buy alcohol is when you got to see the magic.
Yeah, just because, and usually, anybody that's in like kind of a chemical addiction, you're trying to get the thing that you're addicted to. You're in the addiction, drinking or using other things.
But wasn't he like anxious or nervous or...
I mean, anybody that's drinking is drinking for a variety of reasons.
Right.
They have anxieties. I am certain that he didn't want to drink, right? Mm-hmm. And so, but it's a self-perpetuating challenge. That's what addiction is. And so, But there were times, and usually those times were at the end of the month when money had run out, and he had been over kind of the itchiness of just, drinking, where we had him for half a week or a week. And then there were times in which he was able to fight it, right? And you knew he was trying to fight it all the time. But most of the times, in terms of your question about relying, I don't think I could have relied on him for most of the times in which he was in the throes of his addiction. In the times in which, and what I could count on him for was he would always give you great advice and a good opinion, right? He had this phrase which my brothers and I always laugh at, right? When we would get too high and mighty, he would say this, like, "What do you want, a medal or And I'd be like,
"Oh yeah."
But for me, like, and I knew he loved me and stuff like that, but he was saying, "Don't get too high on yourself," right?
So the lesson at this point in your life is really about like the importance of family, even though it can be fractured. But I just think it's really hard to have that kind of grace in the moment.
Yeah.
Because you look up to your parents and you want to be able to count on them.
Yeah, I don't think I had
did you
grace
evolve
then.
to this?
I
that was my
evolved to this.
question.
I was mad at him for a long time.
Yeah.
And ultimately when I got to high school, I was able to kind of be fairly independent. I didn't really need my home life anymore. I could live on my own. And many times
But did you still feel close to your parents?
I always felt close to my mom.
Even when,
But my dad, probably not so much. And for many, many years, I was pretty angry, right? Because your relationship to your father is really important.
How old were you when he passed?
I was probably 27.
Pretty young.
Yeah, he died young, and he died because of the alcohol. But to be honest with you, I'm a hip hop fan. There's a really great song by this hip hop artist named Atmosphere. When I think about, and what he basically says is, he's going through this song and he notices this person that looks like his dad, and then he realizes that it's not his dad because his dad is gone. But he reflects on the times in which he made that part of the relationship more difficult than it needed to be. And I think you have teenage sons, right?
A son and a daughter, yeah.
They can, at that age, they can be passionate about a lot of things, right? They have often their ability to reflect is probably not as strong as it would be later in life. And at the time, I was just angry and young, and I was mad at him, and I didn't want anything to do with him. And I made it, to the song's point, I made it harder than it needed to be. Later in my life, when I did have a chance to be with him, at the end of his life, we had peace, and I was able to say, I'm sorry, I made it more difficult.
Did?
Yeah.
Did he say he was sorry?
He's not, he's a strong Irish Catholic man.
See, so. I think that is a very generous spirit on your part.
Yeah.
That is a lot of grace.
But he also, he started to see me, grow, get a job and do those things. And
at this point, you've been to college, you've been to graduate school.
All that kind of stuff. And so he started, he was more accepting of that, I think, and he was certainly proud, but he didn't say those things because that's not who he was. But as I reflect now, I don't need him to say those things. I would have liked to hear it probably then. It would have meant something. But as I think now, it's by his actions, and his actions showed me that he was someone that was proud and had gotten to a place to be accepting of who I was, and that was great.
Were you surprised at the emotion that you had when he passed?
Yes. I think the hard thing for me is that he passed away, and I only was able to talk to him on the phone. So I was with him at some of the.
Oh, so you weren't with him in person?
No. So the nurse kind of put the phone up to him and said all the things that you say, I love you, and he couldn't talk at that time, but I also got time with him before that, and so I think we ended in a really, really good place. But before that, I was angry for a number of years, and I think that I had the right to be angry, but I also made it more difficult than it needed to be.
Did your parents tell you they loved you when you were growing up?
My mom was huge that
really?
way. Yeah. So she's very huggy and lovey, and my love language is that.
I love that.
Right? And my brother Joe, who that's not his love language, right? And so his love language is acts of service, right? And so he wants to spend time. But for me, my mom is very much a hugger and gives words of affirmation. and for someone at that time who needed those things, my mom always was able to provide that. So, and she, my mom's like 5 foot, and is a ball of energy, and like, so there's never not knowing where my mom stands. She doesn't have a poker face. So
you didn't have abuse or anything like that.
No,
It was
no,
more
no.
the dysfunction of the alcoholism.
I mean, I think like back then, like, like you get spanked.
it was different back
Yeah,
then.
I think we had a belt called the Black Snake and a dog brush, and like if you messed
Right.
up, you would get
Yep,
that. But
yep.
it wasn't. I didn't view it as a brute abuse. I don't view it as now. But I do
But would
think
you
if you did it
spank your
today,
children?
you do it today. Social services might be called. But for me at the time, like it was a parenting technique. Yeah.
Would you feel comfortable doing that with your own children though? Because I had to confront that.
Yeah.
Like I was like, it was a no-go for me. And for my oldest brother who also has children, we made a decision we weren't going to do that.
I spanked my son once.
I did it once too.
It was the worst moment ever.
I know.
It was so terrible.
I did the same.
And partly it was, my son Max is just amazing, and I mean, I'm so proud of him. I felt like I needed to spank him, but I also a little bit was like, well, like, so I did it, and I felt horrible the whole time, and it never happened. And it wasn't like I gave him a big spanking. He was like 4. I patted him on the butt a couple of times. He cried, but I felt horrible. And so for me, actually, it was when I think about that time, I think about there were other times where I'd be at the park. I remember we were at a park, and my son got pushed off a swing by another kid. Me and my brothers grew up fighting. So if you push us
That
off
was normal back then.
Yeah, like
we did too. And by
we
the
got
way,
rewarded for it
all the time.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
my dad would take us to Burger King if we ever got suspended for fighting.
Same. We didn't go to Burger King, but
Right.
you knew you had defended yourself
Yes.
and advocated for yourself. And the truth is, sometimes my oldest brother, defended me. I mean,
Yeah.
it was a thing.
We fought a lot. And so I remember when my son got pushed off the swing at the park, my immediate reaction is, well, go kick that kid's butt.
Right.
Like that's, no one pushes you down like you. And then there was there was the better thinking of like, no, like, that's not normal. Right. So I think that's a little bit of like how I was raised, right. Of coming into my parenting and then me stopping. Right. I still feel like if someone wrongs me, there's a part of me that's like, well, back in the day, I would have punched you in the mouth, right? But like, that's just not what you do in normal society. So.
I will say that I'm a little bit of a hybrid. Like, I'm like, don't ever start the fight. Mm-hmm. But if they won't leave you alone, you've got to stand up for yourself.
Of course. I mean, I feel like I could defend myself in most situations just because we grew up as fighters.
Right.
But like, I feel like now my comfortable muscle is to use, I'm also good with words. So like, I was a bouncer in college, and I was the bouncer that would confuse the drunk person with words. So I feel strong enough with my words. Like I don't need to physically do anything.
I would love to see that.
Oh, it would be great. Like they'd be like, "Oh my God!" Like I'm gonna kick his butt, and I'd be like, "What do you think about peaches?"
And they'd be your
like,
best friend
"What?
at
I
the
don't know
end.
what," yeah, and then they'd be hugging you or whatever. So like I do feel like I do have the power of words, and so that has actually gotten me way farther.
Love it.
Than ever using my hands. So
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's just incredible the transition that you made from a childhood to a path to education. So I do want to come back to that for a minute because I have this fundamental belief that when we look at people who started in challenging circumstances, and feel free to challenge me on this, we have all these role models of people who have been, if we look back and we actually, pull the layers off, we realize they were identified early as having potential. And they were put on a track for success.
Right.
They were given mentors. They were given support or resources, or a teacher saw something in them.
Right.
What do we do with the kids who don't have that? And I'll actually add another component to it, which is a lot of kids have executive functioning challenges, and that's why they don't succeed on that traditional track.
Right.
So how do we help those kids?
Well, I do think for me, like I'm always a huge fan of taking individuals that are in a certain type of life and putting them in an environment that's different from their own. So I did that for myself, right? So I rode my bike to a completely different neighborhood and played football on a completely different team, or went to high school in a neighborhood far from where I lived, somewhat far from where I lived. So I was always in environments that were different than where I was, and school was a saving grace, but also caddying was a saving grace. So I got to I lied about my age and was able to caddy at a really young age and caddied all the way through college. And
You could lie about your age back then.
yeah, totally. And so, but at one point they called me super caddy because I was so dedicated to being a caddy. I worked, in the golf shop and all those types of things. But I liked it because it also exposed me to a world, not a better world, right? It wasn't like, I saw people on the golf course who were leaders in the field who morally were corrupt, right? But like I got to see a different slice of life. And so the ability to see different slices of life and then have me kind of comprehend it and put that together
Perspective
was really valuable.
Yeah.
But I would also say the people in my neighborhood who, we had, there was a woman who lived across the street from me. Her name was Miss Andy, and she had lived in our community a really long time. And I didn't really know her, but she would always say hi to me as I went to the store. Like, she was amazing, right? So like it doesn't matter for me where you're at. Like I'm not saying people in my neighborhood weren't worth spending time with. There were amazing people there who I got great value and great helped me along the way. But they also allowed me to see different slices of life and see how the world worked. And I do think when I see programs that take kids in Baltimore and put them in a different environment, not to say that environment is better, but to say, here's a different environment, see the world with a different lens. If you stood up on this desk like Dead Poet Society and looked at the world differently, you're seeing the world in a different place. And so for me, I got lots of chances to see the world in different perspectives, and I think that made all the difference for me. So I didn't have a mentor. I just had lots of slices of life that I could see, and then like a kaleidoscope, meld them together to say, okay, this is what I think the world is, or this is at least at that time. And as I started to kind of move through life, it just became clearer and clearer.
See, I think when you're a child and you're in that moment, like you don't know that your life isn't great.
Right.
Because that's all you know.
Right.
For me, it was the library.
Right.
So, I go to the library like when I'm 8 or 9 years
Yeah.
old, and I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, I was in a great public school, Baltimore City public schools too,
Right.
by the way.
Right.
Fantastic at the time. I was also bused. But I just remember walking into the library, which was free, and
Yeah.
you could sit down amongst like all of these resources and books and read about other lives. And that was the first time I was like, wow, okay, wait a minute.
Yeah.
There's something else out there, and it gave me a lot of perspective.
I mean, I always knew certain aspects of my life weren't right? Like I knew getting food the way that we got food, right? Like, or things like that. But that said, we also had lots of neighbors that were living the same way. Mm-hmm. I think it became more kind of, as I got older into high school and saw other kids who didn't live the life that I led at home, where I started to realize even more that that's not good, right? That's not. And also, like most of the folks that when I got to high school, who I ran with, didn't really know that part of my life. And so I could just be like them and do that. But to your point, I always knew there were aspects of my life that weren't right. Mm-hmm. Right. And as I got older, more of those aspects became more clear that they were definitely not right. No one should be living on $650 a month.
Nope. That's for sure.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. We weren't ever on food stamps. Instead, my parents would steal.
I see.
Because it would be embarrassing
Yeah.
to take public assistance.
Yeah.
But then they would steal.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you choose your morality.
I guess so.
Sense to you. Yeah.
on the streets, yeah.
Yeah, but it also, like, even amongst poor folks, you would hide your food stamps. I mean, you were, even though you knew everybody
Would
got
you? Oh,
well, like,
interesting.
Kmart was an embarrassing place to go. Nobody wanted to
I remember Kmart.
shop at Kmart.
My first set of dishes came from Kmart. They were $2 a piece.
That's where we got our stuff, right?
Right.
But if you saw somebody from your neighborhood in Kmart, you would like kind of hide down because kind of there's this thing called capping where you would make fun of people and you would stand in a circle and one of the caps were you get your clothes at Kmart, right? And
Yeah. Or in our case, they were hand-me-downs. Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, I had situated. There was a store in my neighborhood called the Free Store.
oh, I've never heard of that.
Yeah, I mean, it was run by a collection of churches. But I remember I got clothes from this Free Store on, let's say, a Monday, wore them on a Wednesday, and a kid at my school said, oh, that's my clothes.
Oh my gosh,
Like,
you're kidding.
And so, like, those are the moments in which you want to, like, melt, right?
I
Because
feel like profound sadness
oh
for
my God,
what
there's
you must
8
have
million
experienced
stories
in
like
that moment.
Oh, I mean, many stories like that, or like,
I literally want to cry. Like
oh my
that.
God, it happens so, or like, you know, like the public schools, like you get free lunch I remember in middle school. And I was like, well, but you had to carry this embarrassing green card. And when you go get your lunch, you showed your green card. And so I was like, I don't want that card. Like my friends are
Right.
here. I'm just going to go hungry and I'll just
That's
eat.
right.
But if you didn't come get your green card, at a certain point, they would announce your name on the loudspeaker to come and get your green card.
Right.
And so, like, lots of situations like that, and it goes to the how, right? Like, can you help somebody through hunger in this instance without embarrassing them in front of their peers?
Right.
And for them, like, they're not thinking that way because they don't either have lived experience to know what that feels like, or haven't been trained on it, or whatever the case may be.
So you take all of this experience and you decide to devote your life to helping other people.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a firm believer, and I say this all the time. Like, one of the reasons I work so hard is because I wanted financial stability.
Sure.
I knew I couldn't, in my case, count on my family.
Right.
I knew that I was on my own to figure it out. And I became very focused on financial stability. In fact, my first job in business was at Rowe Price,
Right,
where
right.
you are most well known for
Yeah.
in building their philanthropic organization. And I just remember, like you had that experience of going into another world. When I walked into that office to answer phone calls for Rowe Price as a 20-year-old,
Yeah.
21-year-old, I was literally a couple miles from where I grew up.
Right.
And I walked into this environment in this office where people were dressed differently and like the expectations were different. And I was trying to learn how to be successful in that world. And I liked it
Yeah.
immediately.
Of course.
I was like, I want this.
Yeah.
But it was a world away, even though it was just a couple miles from where I grew up.
Yeah.
And it was in that moment that I was like, business is my thing.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I'm going to build a successful career in
course.
business. Now, it wasn't that easy, of course, because
course.
I was a high school dropout. I hadn't gone to college. It took 10 years to get onto a path where I could actually build a real career for myself. But I just remember that moment of, yes, this is a thing. Didn't know about it. Now I know about it, and now I want it. In your case, instead, you took all of these incredible academic credentials and experience, and you turned it into a life of service.
Right.
How did you know you wanted to be a community organizer and then be a leader in philanthropy?
So some people go into this work because they've had the experiences that I may have had or whatever, and they say, okay, I don't want that to happen to others. That wasn't my case. I did like to serve, but I wasn't necessarily in the beginning serving because I had been poor or whatever the case may be. I was good at this strand of work. So as a community organizer or a political organizer, I was good at mobilizing people. I had the ability, I mean, you can equate it to the business community, the ability to sell something. But I'm not selling cell phones. I'm selling the ability of a vision of supporting somebody or making your community a better place. I was good at those things. So I take my, now what turbo boosts my work is that I also come from the past that I do. So I can speak from authority.
I'm going to say most people don't know that when they first meet you because you have so much presence and
Right.
you're so knowledgeable.
Right.
They're probably surprised to hear your background.
They do, yeah. So like at T-Row, I had this framed food stamp in my office. And, when people would come in, every so often they would be like, what's that? And the reason I had it there is because most of the folks that would ask that had come from like a Bloomberg terminal, or they're working in an industry in finance, and they're brilliant at what they do. I really enjoyed my time at T-Row, and part of the reason I enjoyed it is because there were just really amazing and smart people doing a kind of business that I had never been affiliated with, but they're great at what they do. But it is an economic model, just like food stamps are an economic model. Both live in this world, both people that use that, most people say, well, what the heck is that? Well, that's a food stamp. That's a currency that buys food. They had never seen it before, had no idea what it meant. Right? Now, for me, I couldn't go up and look at a Bloomberg terminal and tell you anything about what's going on there, other than arrows are going up or down, and that's good or bad. That's an entirely different economic model. that someone like me has no idea, right? And for me, it was important to have folks know those different sides of the whatever. Now, I understand the economic model of food stamps. My job at Tiro was philanthropic, so I'm not, if they asked me to trade anything, they'd be in real danger. But for me, understanding what a food stamp means in my world actually helps me in my work. But if I had never, I think, been involved in being poor, I feel like I'd be good at philanthropy. It just helps me that I have those experiences. So I usually call it soup from the ladle. I've gotten soup from the ladle from a soup kitchen. I've been a person who's given soup from the ladle, whether a volunteer or a frontline worker. I've managed soup ladlers. I was an academic. I studied soup ladling. And at Tiro, I was funding soup ladlings. That is a rare place, somebody who understands all aspects of soup from the ladle. But I would be good at the other aspects if I hadn't gotten soup from the ladle, I feel too.
How big was your team at Tiro?
It grew to around 10. I ran 2 organizations there. So I ran a donor advised fund, and then I ran the philanthropic efforts for the
That's
firm.
kind of a big deal to run a donor advice. I
It
mean,
is.
you're saying that so casually. That's a big deal. That's like at the pinnacle.
Yeah, it was fun. And for me, I like working with donors. So the reason I love the Tiro experience is because I got to work with donors directly.
Well, first tell our listeners what a donor advised fund
So
is.
donor advised fund is essentially if you don't want to create your own foundation, right? You don't want to go through the legal process and all those types of things. There are companies and entities like the Baltimore Community Foundation actually has the ability to do this, but also so does large firms like Rowe Price. You can go and create an account that's like your mini foundation. You put money in there. They do all the legal stuff.
How much money do people put in something like
All
this?
ranging from $5,000 to $5 million, right?
Wow.
All different sizes. And so for me, like philanthropy is an aspect of community engagement, right? We're most of your listeners and you are philanthropic and I am as well. That's an act of changing community. So I like that being part of somebody saying, I want to change my world and I'm going to do that through giving my portion of my largesse and I want to give them advice and counsel and make it easy for them. That was one aspect of what we do. And then the philanthropic part on behalf of the firm. The firm wants to be a good community partner, and I got the luxury of being able to do that on behalf of Rowe Price and had a team there on both sides.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it was fun.
So, I mean, there's obviously, you believe in yourself. I mean, I think that's such an important part of your journey is understanding. That's the lesson, is that you have to believe in yourself.
Sure.
Fundamentally. Yeah. And I just think it's so interesting that while you're, going through this journey from community organizing, getting an education, all the way up to Tiro, you're grounded in this, image of the food stamp.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
that's really profound.
Well, I think for me, if I, listen, I could do this work without those experiences. I think the experiences give me credibility. So yes, I led philanthropy for Tiro, but what that philanthropy was known for was this thing called trust-based philanthropy, right? Which I think for me is really important. And it's based on the idea that most times philanthropy will come into a community and say, I'm the smartest person in the room. Let me tell you what you should do.
Thank you for saying that out loud.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
when I was in public office, I sat in my conference room one day and I said, I feel like you're coming in here and telling people what's best for them without really understanding their lived experience.
True.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, it's true. So
it's well-intentioned,
yeah.
but it doesn't meet people where they are.
Well, I mean, think about somebody, at Tiro, I had the ability to give away millions and millions of dollars.
Okay, I didn't realize it was that much.
Yeah, but so when you have that ability,
that's huge.
People automatically treat you different.
That's true.
So you're way smarter than you really are. You're a lot funnier than you really are. And so they give you this kind of power that is quite honestly unearned. And so
Well, yes and no. I mean, you've earned that place.
I know, but the idea is like you get to enter rooms and things
You're
like that.
immediately credible.
Yeah, so and let's say I didn't have those experiences. Some people that are in those roles got them because they worked in marketing for a number of years and now they're given this job, right? And listen, no challenges to them, but I don't come at it as I have to earn that whether I'm named the president of something or not. Like in my constituency is people in community that are living and breathing those problems and challenges and solutions every day. And so for me, I have to earn that trust. I don't get it. And so those individuals often have been mistreated by philanthropy all the time in the way that you named, right? Hey, I think you should do this.
Right.
And you should do this
I
because
know better than
I
you.
know better than you. And communities are tired of that. And so when I got to Baltimore, I came during the week of the unrest. And the city is going through some of its worst moments. And for me, as a community organizer, a former community organizer, I understand that in community, your first job is to listen.
So we need to, for our listeners, create
Yeah.
a sense of place. So
Sure.
you moved to Baltimore for
Yes.
this great job with T. Rowe,
Yes.
and you got here at a pivotal time in our in the city's history.
Yes, big time. I mean, cameras all over the world are looking at Baltimore.
Was that the Freddie Gray
It was
Gray
the death
unrest?
of Mr. Gray. And so I think, for me at least, I remember sitting, and at the time I wasn't known by anybody because it's my first week here. And so if I had been a known philanthropist, it would have been harder for me to do that work. Because I wasn't known, I was able to sit in the back of, community meetings and just kind of listen to what community was saying without anybody trying to like sit next to me or sell themselves.
Love
or whatever the case.
that.
And so, and that was, that's kind of how I like it. And I was able to kind of really learn what community was saying. For me, my job was to listen. And I think we created a way of doing work out of those experiences that ultimately grew into this thing called trust-based philanthropy that other foundations were doing as well. But we became a leader in this way of philanthropy. So as I look back at my 10 years of time at T. Rowe, that's what I'm most proud of, is that we created a model of doing work in community that ultimately was followed, and we counseled over 300 companies around the globe on this way of doing work.
Amazing.
And so for us, it was just the way you do your work. How you do your work is really important, right? Don't create obstacles that don't need to be there, right? Listen to community. You know yourself better than anyone. If I go into your home and start telling you what to do, you're going to tell me to get out of your house.
See, I think that's why you could do that, because you didn't go in to tell them what to do or what they should or shouldn't be doing.
Right.
Instead, you went in with this service mindset.
Sure.
And you were listening before you were
course.
telling.
And ultimately, the number one thing that came out of my listening tours was not, hey, you should work on housing, or let's work on anti-violence initiatives. All those initiatives, certainly the community had recognized were important to them. But the number one issue in their community was fresh fruits and vegetables. And if you want to get an apple in Central West Baltimore, you have to take 2 buses to get it.
Hey, I grew up in a food desert.
Yeah.
There was not a grocery store within, even on the bus.
So if you're a local resident every day, you
hard.
can't get a cucumber or an apple. Yes, your CVS is on fire. That's important too. But this issue is important as well. So for us at T. Rowe, we were like, let's work on that.
What did you guys do for that? Were you able to move the needle on that?
Well, there were great folks.
Because we had Arabers, by the way.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. Which we were
these
funders of.
Really?
Yeah.
You guys funded the Arabers?
We were one of their only funders.
We need to share that with our audience. Arabers are horse-drawn carriages
Yes.
where someone would walk the streets, and in our case, the alleys as well, selling fruits and vegetables
Yes.
off the wagon.
For many of the folks in the community, that's how they got
The best fruit and vegetables.
so good. And we, when I was at T. Rowe, we were really happy to fund the good work of the Arabers. It's also a cultural institution that needs to be maintained. And so, but for us, there's a great group of folks doing work already there. It's not our job to it's not any funder's job to perpetually fund something forever. It's your job to find out, how do you find people that are already doing this work, seed them in the right way, help them build coalition and connection. My biggest resource as a philanthropist was actually social connection, not money.
That is such a powerful thing that you said, and I think that's an important lesson. It's about helping them make the transition.
Yeah.
It's seeding it. It's
Yes.
not funding it forever.
That's right. Yeah.
And we need to figure out how to do that,
Yeah.
as a society.
Yeah,
That is what success looks like.
Well, I remember I was asked to give a keynote at an Aspen Institute event. And I said, well, I don't want any payment, but let me bring 5 people from Baltimore, because it was like 350 of the world's largest philanthropies were going to be there.
Wow.
So in my mind, I was like, well, if I bring 5 groups from Baltimore, and so they were invited, and they were sitting next to really prominent people, but they didn't know how to make that connection. So they all left with no business cards. And so I said,
Interesting.
Socially connecting is a learned ability.
Now, who were the people that you brought? What kinds of organizations
So
are
it'd
you
be,
talking about?
like a youth organization working with young people.
People who weren't T-Row, but they were
No.
in the community
They
doing
were in the West
work.
Baltimore community doing that work, dedicated
They didn't
every day.
understand networking or,
Well,
building.
they understood networking, but not in that way.
Got
right?
it.
So, like for me,
They might have been intimidated.
No, I mean they weren't. They came, but then as we kind of said, hey, like I sat one education organization next to the senior program officer from the Gates Foundation, purposefully, and said, okay, the money is just going to rain down for them because they're doing amazing work.
Yeah, but you got to know the rules of engagement.
Yeah, and so my big lesson was just because you put them in the same room doesn't mean
Right.
they're going to dance, and so I have to dance with them.
That's
a little bit.
so interesting.
But the ability of social, for me, like I know I'm a fundraiser as well, and so like if I'm sitting next to the head of education funding for Gates, I'm not letting them leave without a business card and a Next Connect and all of these types of things, right?
I love
But these
that.
folks, like they were somewhat intimidated. They were happy for the invite, but they didn't know what the next steps of what to do. And these individuals are brilliant. So I'm not saying that them sitting next to them, they didn't know what to do. They just didn't know how to cash in on what the amazing things they were doing and how could they make it.
No one's explained that to them.
So I think for me, like we started to do more and more work around social connection and connecting people in real ways. And, we built a capacity building program and a variety of other things to help people kind of learn and
Got it.
adapt and develop that skill,
That's
which is a thing that
awesome.
we just naturally took for granted. So
John, you've lived the American dream. Like, the story is extraordinary. I know that it had its moments of challenge, but there are things that stand out, like your closeness to your family and your resilience and your determination and how you were able to get from a difficult start to a very successful life. What would you say to our listeners who feel like, it's just impossible, it's hopeless, they
Right.
can't do it? Like, what is your advice to them?
I mean, I would say a couple of things. Listen, I can remember moments where it was really difficult and I didn't know anybody and I felt really alone. And you've got to wake up and just keep going, right? And then find environments. No one is, there are people that are gatekeeping, trying to keep people out of environments. But in the vast majority of spaces, people are wanting people from wherever to join them. And so I would take it upon folks to just find environments that are just going to change your lens a little bit, because you can get stuck in a particular. When I think of the people that in my community that didn't make it out, they didn't know the potential possibilities that existed beyond the railroad tracks that they were on. And I would say that if you can just churn your lens a little bit and see the world in a little bit of a different light, that can be hugely helpful. Build, a lot of people say build a kitchen cabinet, but build a group of folks around there that are going to push their thumb in your side. I have people that kick the crap out of me every day. And they're both family and otherwise. And I think that's really important. And so I would say try to find new lenses and try to find people that will tell you the truth. And just keep plugging away. I mean, I know that that's kind of trite, but it's, for me at least, it was true. That tomorrow's a new day. There's a whole world out there. I'm going to wear my shoe leather out trying to find it. And you're put here for a reason.
Do you think that's true?
I do. I mean, I think you're put here. You wake up and you're breathing, and there's something you're supposed to do with that time, right? And so for me, I do feel like I'm going to use that time to be happy for myself, but also to make the world a better place and to be a producer of a world that's seeing a better day. And I want to be involved in that.
Yeah,
right?
That's awesome. Well, this is our first interview in the new Laura
Nice,
Neuman
yeah,
with the
very nice.
Laura Neuman sign.
Very
But
awesome.
what's important about this studio is that it's full of personal mementos. Like, this is my life, and everything in here has meaning. And I hope that you'll give me the honor of putting your book on one of these shelves.
I'd be happy to.
I'd
That'd
be
awesome.
really thrilled to do that.
Happy to do it. Yeah.
And the other thing is I ask every guest to sign the guest book. We
Nice.
have lots of pens to choose from. I started this a very long time ago in the year 2000. And you'd think I'd have like the page opened. I never do. You can sign it anywhere you like, but I do ask everyone to sign the guest book. You can start a new page if you want, because these are important memories.
Yeah, of
and
course.
I'd be really honored if you would be
Yes,
willing
I'd be happy to do it.
to participate. And thank
Great,
you for
of
joining us
course.
today. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having.
we definitely need a date. We're learning that a date is a good idea because it's like a lot of great memories all together.
It's such a good tradition to have. I love it. And I'll put the date.
What is today's?
5/29.
Yeah, there you
they
go.
say, right?
There you go.
25. Well,
Perfect.
Thank you for letting me do that.
Thank
That's
you
such
for
a great
having
thing.
me. It's a
Thank
pleasure.
You. So
Enjoyed
awesome.
it.
Thanks so much.